Right there in your change jar, old drawer, or forgotten coin box could be a 1776 to 1976 Kennedy half-dollar. A coin that looks ordinary at first glance, but has triggered confusion, rumors, and wild treasure stories for decades. Some people have even claimed these coins sold for thousands, tens of thousands, and in rare online stories, even higher. But here is the truth most collectors will never tell you up front. The real secret is not in fantasy price tags. It is in the hidden mistakes, rare varieties, and overlooked details that can turn a simple 50-cent piece into something truly valuable. Because this is not just any half-dollar. This is the bicentennial Kennedy half-dollar struck to celebrate 200 years of American independence, and millions were released into circulation, which is exactly why almost everyone assumes it is worthless. That assumption is where opportunity begins. In 1976, the United States Mint did something bold. For the first time in history, the half-dollar received a special dual date, 1776 to 1976. The front still carries the image of John F. Kennedy, a symbol of American legacy and loss. But the back was transformed into something unforgettable. A colonial drummer boy, standing proudly with victory in motion, designed by Dennis R. Williams. It was not just a coin. It was a national celebration struck in metal. And because of that celebration, over 1 billion of these coins were produced across Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia issue carries no mint mark at all. That means if you see a 1776 to 1976 Kennedy half-dollar without a mint mark, it most likely came from Philadelphia. And that is where most people stop paying attention. Big mistake. Because while the majority of these coins are still worth only face value or slightly more in circulated condition, a very small number carry secrets that collectors actively hunt for. And those secrets are where the real story begins. Imagine holding a coin that passed through thousands of hands of vending machines, cash registers, forgotten piggy banks, unnoticed for nearly 50 years. Now imagine that same coin carrying a hidden minting error, something so subtle that even experienced collectors sometimes miss it under normal lighting. This is where things start to get interesting. Point one of the most talked about varieties is the double die obverse. This happens when the design is accidentally stamped twice at slightly different angles during production. On a Kennedy half-dollar, this can create doubling in the lettering, especially around Liberty and the date. At first glance, it looks normal. But under magnification, the letters appear slightly shadowed, almost vibrating with a second outline. And that small imperfection can turn a common coin into a highly collectible piece worth significantly more than face value. But that is only the beginning. Another hidden surprise comes from struck-through errors. This occurs when debris, grease, or foreign material interferes with the striking process. The result can be missing details, unusual textures, or strange patterns embedded into the surface of the coin. Some collectors describe it as the coin telling a story of the exact moment it was made, frozen in imperfection. Then there are off-center strikes. These are dramatic. The design is visibly shifted, sometimes leaving part of the coin blank. The more off-center the strike, the more dramatic the visual appeal, and the higher the collector interest. Now pause for a second and think about this. But the real excitement comes when you understand how condition changes everything. A heavily worn bicentennial half-dollar might only be worth its face value of 50 cents. But a sharp, uncirculated example, especially one with strong luster and no contact marks, can reach several dollars or more depending on demand. And in rare cases where certified mint state examples with unique errors appear, collectors may compete aggressively to own them. Not because the base coin is rare, but because the combination of condition, eye appeal, and error creates something unique, something irreplaceable. Now here is where confusion often spreads online. You may see videos or posts claiming that these coins have sold for millions of dollars. Let's be very clear and grounded here. There is no verified record of a standard 1776 to 1976 Kennedy half-dollar selling for millions, however, and this is important. Exaggerated claims often spread because people misunderstand rare auction results from completely different coins, or confuse experimental pieces, off-metal strikes, or high-end certified rarities from other series. In reality, the most valuable bicentennial half-dollars are typically high-grade silver-clad specimens from special mint sets, or coins with dramatic mint errors verified by grading services. These can reach hundreds of dollars, sometimes more in exceptional cases. But the true value is not in fantasy numbers. It is in knowing what to look for before everyone else does. Because here is the uncomfortable truth most people ignore. Rare coins are not always sitting in museums or vaults. Sometimes they are sitting in your house right now. In a coffee can. In a forgotten envelope. In a jar you have not opened in years. Start with the date. 1776 to 1976. Then look at the front for Kennedy's portrait. Check for doubling in the letters of liberty and "In God We Trust." Next, examine the surface under bright light. Look for unusual marks, missing details, or anything that looks slightly off, because condition is everything in this world. Now here is another hidden layer most people miss. Not all 1776 to 1976 half dollars are created equal. Some were made for circulation. Some were made for collectors in special mint sets. And a small portion were struck in 40% silver versions, typically found in special uncirculated or proof sets. These silver issues have a noticeably different tone and weight compared to standard copper-nickel coins. This is where experienced collectors pay close attention. Because silver content alone can separate common change from collectible treasure. But again, even these silver versions are not automatically worth fortunes. Their value depends heavily on condition and certification, because it represents possibility. The possibility that something ordinary, something ignored, something passed over thousands of times, could still hold hidden value. And that is what keeps people searching. Every coin jar checked, every drawer opened, every handful of change examined a little more carefully, and now ask yourself one final question. The truth is simple. Most of these coins will always be worth 50 cents. But a very few, carry characteristics that set them apart in ways most people never recognize. And those are the coins that change everything for the person who slows down long enough to look. So before you dismiss that old half dollar as just another piece of history, take a second look. But what if I told you that a simple 1776 to 1976 Kennedy half dollar with no mint mark sitting in your drawer could be hiding secrets that collectors have chased for decades, with certain rare versions selling for thousands of dollars and being whispered about in online forums as once-in-a-lifetime discoveries? And here is where it gets even more intense. Because while millions of these coins were minted for the United States bicentennial celebration, only a tiny fraction contain the kind of minting mistakes and condition anomalies that turn a 50-cent piece into something collectors fight over. Now imagine this. You are holding history in your hand. Not just any history, but a coin created to celebrate 200 years of American independence. A design so iconic that it replaced the traditional reverse for a limited time only. And yet, within that massive production run, hidden variations slipped through quality control and escaped into circulation. Most people never notice them, but a few do. And those few are the ones who end up searching old jars, bank rolls, and forgotten piggy banks with a level of excitement most people would never understand. Because the truth is simple. Some of these coins are worth face value, but others are not. And today you are going to learn exactly why. Let's go back to 1976, the United States was celebrating its bicentennial, and the mint released a special Kennedy half dollar with a dual date, 1776 to 1976, honoring the birth of the nation. The front still carries the profile of John F. Kennedy, but the back is where everything changes. A colonial drummer boy design replaced the traditional eagle, symbolizing the spirit of revolution. It was patriotic. It was historic. And it was produced in enormous quantities, which is exactly why most people assume it is worthless. But here is where that assumption starts to fall apart. Because not all 1776 to 1976 half dollars are the same. Some were struck in Philadelphia with no mint mark. Some were struck in Denver with a D mint mark. And special collector versions were struck in San Francisco, often in silver composition. And within those groups, something strange happened. Mistakes were made. And mistakes in the coin world can change everything. Now let's slow down for a second, because this is where most people miss the real story. When coins are produced, they go through massive high-speed minting presses. Millions of coins are stamped, inspected, and rushed into circulation. And in that chaos, small errors escape. Errors like double dies, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, wrong metal compositions, and even coins struck on the wrong type of blank entirely. At first glance, these might sound like small defects. But in the world of collectors, they can mean the difference between 50 cents and $50,000. Now here is the question that should be running through your mind right now. Because one of the most famous varieties from the 1776 to 1976 half-dollar series is the double die obverse. This is where the design on the front of the coin appears slightly doubled due to a misalignment in the minting process. It can be subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye. But under magnification, the letters in Liberty or the details in the date can show clear doubling, and collectors go crazy for it. Now imagine finding one in change. Most people would never even notice. They would toss it in a jar, forget about it, spend it without a second thought. And that is exactly how valuable coins slip away every single day. But we are not done yet, because another rare category involves silver composition coins. Yes, you heard that correctly. While most 1776 to 1976 half-dollars were made of copper nickel clad, a special collector version was struck in 40% silver. These were primarily sold in special mint sets and not released for general circulation. However, over the years, some have been mistakenly spent or separated from their original packaging. And when that happens, everything changes. A coin that looks identical to a regular half-dollar suddenly carries significant value simply because of its metal content. But here is where things take a turn into even more interesting territory. Because errors are not the only thing collectors look for. Condition is everything. A coin that looks like it just left the mint, with sharp details and no wear, can be graded at extremely high levels. And in the rarest cases, top-graded specimens with exceptional eye appeal can command strong demand from serious collectors. Now let's pause for a moment, because this is where a lot of viral misinformation starts spreading online. You may have heard claims that certain bicentennial half-dollars are worth millions of dollars. It sounds exciting. Sounds life-changing. It sounds like a dream. But here is the reality. Verified auction records do not support multi-million-dollar sales for standard 1776 to 1976 half-dollars. Even rare error varieties and top-condition pieces typically sell in the hundreds to thousands, with only extreme, highly unusual mint errors reaching higher specialist levels. Because the internet loves mystery, and mystery gets attention. But real value comes from verified rarity, not viral exaggeration. And that is exactly why learning the truth gives you an advantage. Because while others are chasing myths, you can focus on what actually matters. Real errors, real varieties, real value. Now let's talk about the specific types of mistakes you should be looking for right now. First, look closely at the date and lettering. If anything appears doubled or slightly shadowed, you may be looking at a double die variety. Second, examine the edge and surface. If the coin looks uneven, clipped, or oddly struck, it could be a mint error known as a planchet defect or strike error. Third, check the color and weight. If something feels off compared to a normal half-dollar, it might not be standard clad composition. And fourth, never ignore uncirculated condition coins. Even common coins in pristine condition can carry collector premiums. But here is the most important part. You need to know where these coins hide. Because they are not just in old collections. They are in circulation. They are in bankrolls. They are in coin jars sitting on kitchen counters across America right now. And most people are completely unaware of what they are holding. Now imagine this for a moment. You take a handful of change from your pocket. You look down and see a 1776 to 1976 half-dollar staring back at you. That single decision could be the difference between 50 cents and something far more meaningful. Because every collector story starts the same way. Someone notices something unusual. Someone asks a question. Someone decides to look closer, and suddenly, a coin that everyone ignored becomes the center of attention. But there is one final truth you need to understand. The coin market is driven by awareness. If you do not know what to look for, you will never see it. And that is why so many valuable coins are still out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right person to recognize them. So here is your challenge. Go check your coins. Go look through that jar. Go open that old box you forgot about years ago. Because somewhere in there, a small piece of American history might be waiting. Not a myth, not a fantasy, but a real coin with real characteristics that collectors actually search for. And even if you do not find a rare error, you will walk away with something even more powerful. Knowledge. Because once you understand what makes these coins special, you will never look at pocket change the same way again. And who knows? Hidden in plain sight, passed through millions of hands, overlooked by most collectors for decades. There exists a coin that looks ordinary at first glance but carries a story so powerful it has sparked rumors of life-changing payouts and auction numbers that sound almost unreal. The 1971 D Mint Mark $50 is one of those coins that people dismiss without a second thought. Yet inside this seemingly common piece of currency lies a world of hidden minting mysteries, rare errors, and variations that could turn pocket change into a fortune. Now imagine this for a moment. You are sitting at home, going through a handful of old coins, maybe something you inherited, maybe something you got from the bank, and among them is a simple $50 dated 1971 with a small D Mint mark. Nothing special at first glance. Because here is where things get strange. Certain 1971 D $50 are believed to contain striking minting anomalies. Some show unusual strike characteristics, others display doubling in design elements that can only be seen under magnification, and a few have surfaces that suggest something went wrong during production in a way that should never have left the facility. These are not the coins you see every day. These are the coins that collectors whisper about. And the question that should immediately hit you is this. Before we go deeper, understand this is not just about a coin. This is about timing, awareness, and the possibility that what you have been spending without a second thought might actually belong in a completely different category of value. Because in the world of rare coins, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is often just a single detail that most people never think to check. Now let us step into the shadow behind the 1971 D $50 and uncover why collectors still chase it today. The year 1971 was a turning point in American coinage. The United States was transitioning in design, composition, and minting processes. The $50 featuring John F. Kennedy had already become iconic, but the early 70s production runs were not perfect. In fact, they were far from it. Minting technology at the time was evolving, but it was still prone to errors that today would be caught instantly by modern quality control systems. That is exactly why certain 1971 D $50 stand out. They carry subtle imperfections that were never intended to exist. One of the most talked about anomalies is strike weakness combined with unusual die deterioration. In simple terms, parts of the coin design appear slightly distorted or incomplete, but not in a random way. These patterns sometimes repeat across specific batches, suggesting something went wrong during production rather than damage after circulation. Then there is the phenomenon collectors call doubling. This is where letters, numbers, or design features appear slightly duplicated or shadowed. On a 1971 D $50, this can be extremely subtle. You might need a magnifying glass to notice it, but when it is present in a strong form, collectors pay attention immediately. Why? Because doubling can sometimes indicate a rare minting error known to significantly increase value in the numismatic world. But here is where the story takes a turn. Not every 1971 D $50 is rare. In fact, most are common. Most are worth only face value or slightly more depending on condition. But the rare ones, the truly unusual ones, are where speculation begins to build. Some auction listings over the years have shown extraordinary prices for high-grade specimens with exceptional errors, especially when certified in pristine condition by major grading services. And this is where the excitement explodes. Because over time, stories have circulated among collectors and auction watchers about rare $50 from this era reaching staggering values. Some claims, though heavily debated and not always verified, suggest that exceptional error coins in top condition have been associated with prices reaching into the millions of dollars in private sales or high-end speculative markets. Now pause for a second and think about that. A coin originally meant for 50 cents being discussed in the same breath as millions of dollars. Even if only a fraction of those stories are true, the possibility is enough to keep collectors searching every single day. First, examine the mint mark. The 1971 D indicates it was struck in Denver. Coins from this mint can show variations in strike pressure and die usage. Next, look closely at Kennedy's profile. Any unusual doubling around the ear, the hairline, or the lettering can be a potential indicator of something special. Then rotate the coin under light. Watch for inconsistencies in shine or texture that might suggest a double die or misaligned strike. But here is the part most people miss. Condition matters just as much as the error itself. A rare error on a heavily worn coin might still be interesting, but a rare error on a near-perfect uncirculated specimen can be dramatically more valuable. That is where the real competition begins among collectors. And just when you think you understand it, there is another twist. Some 1971 D half dollars are believed to have been struck using dies that were already wearing out. This creates what experts call die deterioration effects. These effects can look like softness in design or unusual blending of details. While many people mistake this for damage, experienced collectors know that certain patterns of deterioration can make a coin historically interesting and potentially more desirable. Because this is where opportunity hides. Not in brand new discoveries, but in overlooked everyday objects that have already been circulating for over half a century. As we move deeper, there is something even more fascinating. The market for rare half dollars has grown significantly over the years. What used to be a niche interest has become a global competition among collectors, investors, and hobbyists who understand that rare coins are not just collectibles. They are tangible assets with limited supply and unpredictable demand. And when demand rises while supply stays fixed, value can move in ways that surprise even experienced collectors. This is why auction houses occasionally see bidding wars over coins that most people would never glance at twice. A coin graded in near-perfect condition with a strong mint error can attract attention from serious buyers willing to pay extraordinary prices. Even if the most extreme figures are rare or debated, the excitement they generate continues to fuel the hunt. Now let us slow down for a moment and bring everything into focus. You are not just learning about a coin. You are learning how value hides in plain sight. You are learning that history does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it sits quietly in your pocket, waiting for the right person to notice. And that brings us to the most important question of all. What if somewhere in your possession right now there is a 1971 D half dollar with a subtle mint error, waiting to be identified, waiting to be understood, waiting to be turned from overlooked change into something far more powerful? This is the moment most people would ignore. They would move on. They would assume it is just another coin story. But the people who win in the world of collectibles are not the ones who assume. They are the ones who check. Because the truth is simple. You do not need to find a perfect coin. You need to find the right imperfection. And in a world where errors can mean rarity and rarity can mean value, that changes everything. So here is the challenge. Go back and look. Not casually, but carefully. Examine your half dollars. Pay attention to dates. Focus on mint marks. Look for anything that feels even slightly unusual. Because discoveries do not always announce themselves with excitement. Sometimes they wait quietly until someone finally pays attention. And if you do find something unusual, something that does not quite match the rest, then you may have just stepped into a world most people never even realize exists. A world where a simple 1971 D half dollar is no longer just currency, but a story of error, history, and possibility. Right now, sitting in jars, drawers, old coffee cans, and forgotten collections across America, there are 1974 Kennedy half dollars that most people completely ignore. They look ordinary. They feel ordinary. They spend like 50 cents. But what if I told you that one of these so-called ordinary coins could carry a hidden mistake so rare, so dramatic, and so misunderstood that collectors have spent years chasing it in silence while others unknowingly spent it on a soda machine? And here is where it gets even more intense, because some of the wildest stories in the coin world claim that a single rare error Kennedy half dollar, under the right conditions, in perfect preservation with the right combination of minting mistakes, could reach numbers that sound almost unreal. Figures whispered about in collector circles. Listings that spark debate. And in extreme, unverified cases, values claimed as high as millions of dollars. But before you dismiss this as just another coin story, you need to understand something very important. Every fortune ever discovered in pocket change started with someone who thought it was ordinary. Now let's go back to 1974, a year that most people remember for gas lines, economic tension, and a changing America. The U.S. Mint was striking millions upon millions of Kennedy half dollars to keep up with circulation demand. Philadelphia struck coins with no mint mark. Denver struck theirs with a small d. San Francisco focused on proofs. Nothing unusual at first glance. Nothing that screams treasure. But here is the twist that most people never hear. Even in massive production years like 1974, mistakes were still slipping through. And those mistakes are where the real story begins. Imagine a coin passing through high-speed machinery, struck under extreme pressure, inspected briefly, and then released into circulation. Now imagine that one coin missing a layer of metal, or one coin struck twice, or one coin struck slightly off-center, Just enough to change everything for collectors decades later. Sounds small, right? But in the world of rare coins, small mistakes create massive value shifts. Let's start with one of the most searched possibilities, the 1974 no-mint mark Kennedy half-dollar from Philadelphia. On its own, this coin is not rare. Millions exist. But within that massive production run, certain anomalies can turn a normal coin into something extraordinary. And this is where collectors start paying attention. One of the most dramatic error types is the missing clad layer error. Picture this: a coin that should have two outer layers of copper-nickel bonding together. But for some reason, one layer fails during production. The result is a coin that looks off, lighter, strange in color, almost as if it doesn't belong in circulation. Many people overlook it. Some even think it is damaged, but collectors recognize it instantly because true missing clad layer errors are not damage. They are birth defects from the minting process itself. And in high-grade condition, they can bring serious attention from specialized buyers. Now let's slow down for a moment, because this is where most people miss the real opportunity. Not every valuable coin looks shiny and perfect. Sometimes it looks wrong, very wrong. Now imagine another scenario from 1974. A coin is struck twice due to a mechanical misalignment. The design appears doubled. Letters seem slightly shadowed. Eyes on the portrait appear ghosted. This is what collectors call a double die effect or strike doubling, depending on the cause. Most people mistake it for wear and tear. They spend it without a second thought, but in the collecting world, strong doubling on a Kennedy half-dollar can turn a 50-cent piece into something worth hundreds or even thousands, depending on condition and severity. Still not convinced? Let's go deeper. There are also struck through errors. Imagine a small piece of debris sitting on the die during striking. Grease, metal shavings, or dust. When the coin is struck, that foreign object leaves a permanent mark. A strange void, a distorted letter, a missing detail that should not be missing to the untrained eye. It looks like damage to a collector. It is a fingerprint of the minting process itself, and every fingerprint tells a story. Now here comes the moment that changes everything, because while most 1974 Kennedy half-dollars are common, the combination of high-grade preservation plus major error types is where the coin world becomes unpredictable. A coin with a major error in near-perfect condition is where bidding wars begin, and this is where rumors start to spread. Some online listings and collector discussions occasionally throw out extreme numbers for exceptional error coins in top certified condition. In rare and highly debated cases, figures reach into the hundreds of thousands. And in sensational claims that circulate across forums and auction chatter, some even mention multi-million-dollar expectations for extraordinary mint error combinations in perfect condition. But here is the truth that experienced collectors understand: those numbers are not the norm. They represent the absolute edge cases of rarity, condition, and demand colliding at the same time. Still, the idea remains powerful, because if even a fraction of those possibilities are real in the right circumstances, then the coins sitting unnoticed in everyday collections suddenly become far more interesting. Now ask yourself something. When was the last time you checked your half-dollars closely, not just looked at them, but truly examined them, rotated them under light, studied the edges, looked for doubling, missing layers, odd coloration, or strange strike patterns? Because here is where the story becomes personal. Every collector who ever made a life-changing discovery started exactly like you, with a coin they almost ignored. Let's bring this back to the 1974 Philadelphia no-mint mark half-dollar. The most important thing to remember is this: the mint mark itself is not the treasure, the error is. And sometimes the absence of something unusual is what makes the unusual stand out even more. Collectors look for things like mismatched surfaces, unusual smoothness in certain areas, weak strikes on design details, or unusual weight differences that suggest something went wrong during production. Even a slight deviation can trigger deeper inspection, and deeper inspection is where discoveries are made. Now imagine finding one of these coins in a dusty old collection. At first glance it looks like nothing special, you almost set it aside, but something makes you pause. Maybe the shine looks different, maybe the portrait looks slightly distorted, maybe the coin feels just a little off in your hand. That moment of hesitation is everything, because that is the moment most treasures are either discovered or lost forever. Now let's build toward the final truth. The real value of a 1974 no-mint mark Kennedy half-dollar is not in the date alone. It is in the story of what happened during production. It is in the mistakes that escaped quality control. It is in the survivors that still exist today in circulation, forgotten boxes, and inherited collections. And the most powerful part, they are still being found even today, right now. Somewhere in America, someone is holding a coin like this without realizing it. And here is where everything comes together, because whether the value is 50 cents or $5,000, or in extreme rare cases far beyond that depending on error type and certification, the real opportunity is knowledge that most people do not have, knowledge that turns ordinary moments into discovery moments. So before you move on with your day, before you ignore that old coin jar, Before you dismiss anything from the 1970s as common change, stop and take a second look, because the next coin you touch could carry a story that has been hidden for decades, and if you are lucky enough to spot the right error at the right time. Because hidden inside the year 1998 is a coin so overlooked, so underestimated, and so dangerously easy to miss that most people have spent it without a second thought, never realizing what they just let go. A simple $50. A 1998 P mint mark Kennedy $50. Ordinary at first glance. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screams wealth. But in the world of collectors, appearances are the biggest lie a coin can tell. And today, you are about to step into a story where small mistakes at the US Mint have created some of the most sought-after modern treasures in circulation, coins that can turn a few cents into life-changing money. But here is the question that should immediately grab your attention, and most importantly, what if you were holding one right now without even knowing it? Let's begin. In 1998, the US Mint continued producing Kennedy $50 for circulation, but something important was happening behind the scenes. Demand for $50 had dropped dramatically. Banks barely ordered them. Most people didn't use them. And because of that, many 1998 P $50 ended up sitting in storage bags, mint sets, and limited circulation releases. Which is exactly where the story gets interesting. Because when coins are produced in lower demand environments, strange things begin to happen. Dies wear differently, strikes vary more than usual, and small minting mistakes that would normally be caught slip through unnoticed. And in the case of the 1998 P Kennedy $50, collectors believe that a combination of weak strikes, die deterioration, and rare minting anomalies created several overlooked varieties that are now heavily searched for in the collector market. But here is where the story takes a sharp turn. Because most people assume modern coins cannot be valuable. That is the biggest mistake you can make. In reality, modern coins are where some of the most exciting error discoveries are happening today. And the 1998 P $50 sits right in that dangerous zone between common pocket change and hidden collectible treasure. Now listen carefully, because this is where the first major secret appears. Not all 1998 P $50 are created equal. Some carry subtle but powerful errors that change everything. Point one of the most discussed is strike weakness combined with die deterioration. First, that might sound boring. But in the coin world, this is where value begins to appear. When a die begins to wear down, details on the coin start to fade unevenly. Kennedy's hair may appear weak. Letters in the motto may look slightly mushy. The rim might seem softer than normal. Most people would think that is just a worn coin. Collectors see something else entirely. They see a coin that was struck during a specific stage of die failure. And in certain cases, those transitional die states are rare enough to attract strong premium interest. But we are only getting started, because there are also reports of off-center strikes where the design is not properly aligned. Imagine Kennedy's profile pushed slightly too far to one side, leaving a crescent of blank metal on the opposite edge. That kind of mistake should never leave the mint. But history tells us it sometimes does. And when it does, collectors pay attention. Now here comes the part that really keeps people searching. Some 1998 P Kennedy $50 have been found with doubling effects, especially in lettering and date areas. This is known as double die characteristics. Not always dramatic, sometimes extremely subtle. So subtle that you need magnification just to confirm it. But subtle does not mean worthless. In fact, in the coin world, subtle errors often bring the strongest demand because they are harder to find and easier to overlook. And that brings us to the emotional core of this entire story. Right now, there are people checking coin rolls, bank bags, and inherited collections hoping to find one of these anomalies. Not because it is guaranteed. Not because it is easy. But because of the possibility. Because all it takes is one discovery. One coin. One moment of recognition. And everything changes. But here is where the narrative becomes even more intense. There are online claims and viral stories suggesting that rare examples of modern $50 errors have sold for staggering amounts, even reaching figures that sound almost unbelievable. Some of these claims talk about coins valued in the hundreds of thousands. Others push even further into the realm of millions. And one number that often circulates in online discussions is a supposed multi-million-dollar valuation tied to rare mint error $50 in exceptional condition. But here is the truth you must understand clearly. Verified auction records for 1998 P Kennedy $50 do not support consistent multi-million-dollar sales, however. And this is important. High-grade mint state examples, dramatic mint errors, and rare transitional varieties can still command strong premiums, sometimes reaching hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on condition, rarity, and collector demand. The real danger is not believing the hype. The real danger is missing the opportunity entirely. Because even if a coin is not worth millions, it does not mean it is not worth finding. Now let's go deeper into what actually matters: condition, strike quality. An error presence. A standard 1998 P. Kennedy half-dollar in circulated condition might only be worth face value or slightly above. But a high-grade uncirculated example can become something entirely different. Now imagine combining that high-grade condition with a verified mint error. Suddenly the story changes. Collectors begin competing, prices begin rising, and coins that once seemed ordinary start becoming targets for serious buyers. These are not random questions. These are the exact clues collectors use to separate common coins from collectible anomalies. And here is where the tension builds. Again, because most people never check, they spend, they ignore, they overlook. And in doing so, they unknowingly let opportunity slip through their fingers. But you are still here, which means you are already ahead of most people. Now let's talk about where these coins are actually found. The answer might surprise you. They are still in circulation, they are still sitting in old collections, they are still inside forgotten coin jars in garages, drawers, and storage boxes across America. And occasionally, they appear in bankrolls released back into circulation by people who never realized what they had. That is what makes this so powerful. This is not ancient history. This is ongoing discovery. Right now. And now we arrive at the most important moment of this entire story. Because the real value of the 1998 P. Kennedy half-dollar is not just in money.it, is in awareness.it, is in knowing that value can hide in plain sight, that mistakes can become treasures, that overlooked objects can hold unexpected opportunity, and that the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is often just one small detail. So here is the final question you need to ask yourself. The truth is simple. Most fortunes are not found in vaults. They are found in everyday places, disguised as everyday objects, waiting for someone curious enough to look twice. And the 1998 P. Kennedy half-dollar is a perfect example of that reality. It does not announce itself. It does not shine brighter than the rest. It does not demand attention. But for those who understand what to look for, it becomes something entirely different. A reminder that value is often hidden, patience is rewarded, and opportunity rarely looks like opportunity at first glance. A story hidden inside a simple piece of change that once moved quietly through American pockets in 1977, never drawing attention, never asking to be noticed, but possibly holding secrets that could change everything for the person who finally understands what they are looking at. Because today we are diving into one of the most overlooked coins in modern U.S. history, the 1977 Kennedy half-dollar with no mint mark, a coin that millions of people have seen, touched, and spent without ever realizing what might be hiding inside it. And before you assume it is just another ordinary 50-cent piece, you might want to think again, because history has a strange habit of hiding value in the most ordinary places. Now imagine this for a moment. You are going through an old jar of coins, maybe something that has been sitting in your home for decades. Pennies, nickels, quarters, half-dollars all mixed together in silence. You are about to ignore most of it like everyone else would, when suddenly something catches your eye. A half-dollar. Dated 1977. No mint mark. It looks normal at first. Almost too normal. Because in the world of coin collecting, normal is never truly normal. And that is where this story begins. In 1977, the United States Mint struck Kennedy half-dollars primarily in Philadelphia and Denver, with Philadelphia coins famously carrying no mint mark at all. To most people, that detail means nothing. But to collectors, it is the starting point of every investigation. Because every coin without a mint mark raises a question. At first glance, the 1977 no mint mark half-dollar is not rare. In fact, millions were produced. Most entered circulation. Most were spent, exchanged, and forgotten. And that is exactly why so many people dismiss it today without a second thought. But here is where things begin to get interesting, because within that massive production run, something unexpected can happen. Something that turns ordinary coins into extraordinary discoveries. Minting errors. And when we say errors, we are not talking about minor imperfections that no one cares about. We are talking about the kind of mistakes that collectors spend years hunting for. The kind of mistakes that can turn 50 cents into hundreds, sometimes thousands, and in extremely rare and heavily discussed cases, become the center of viral claims that circulate across the internet like legends waiting to be proven. Let's start with something subtle. Something most people would miss even if it was right in front of them. Double die errors. A double die occurs when a coin's design is struck more than once in slightly misaligned positions. The result can be a ghost-like doubling effect on letters, numbers, or even Kennedy's profile. On a 1977 half dollar, this might show up in the date, the words, "In God We Trust," or "Liberty." To the untrained eye, it looks like a blur, but to collectors, it looks like opportunity. And opportunity in this world often means money. Then there are off-center strikes. Imagine a coin being struck but not properly aligned in the press. The design shifts. Part of it is missing. Part of it is stretched. Suddenly you have a half dollar that looks like it came out of a completely different timeline. The more dramatic the misalignment, the more attention it attracts from collectors. And attention in the coin world creates demand. But we are only getting started. There are also clipped planchet errors, where a small piece of the coin appears to be missing, as if someone took a bite out of it. There are struck-through errors, where foreign material like grease or debris interferes with the strike, leaving strange textures or missing details. There are planchet flaws, lamination errors, and even coins that appear slightly different in weight or surface consistency. Each one of these mistakes tells a story. Each one is a snapshot of chaos inside a highly controlled minting process. But here is the question that keeps collectors awake at night. Now let's take a step deeper. The 1977 no-mint mark Kennedy half dollar is not typically considered a high-value coin in standard condition. Most examples in circulation grade trade for modest amounts, sometimes just a few dollars above face value depending on condition. Even uncirculated examples remain accessible to collectors. But the moment an error enters the picture, everything changes. Because collectors do not just pay for coins. They pay for stories. They pay for rarity. They pay for uniqueness. And the rarer the mistake, the more intense the hunt becomes. And this is where things start to get controversial, exciting, and in some corners of the internet, almost mythical. There are circulating claims, often unverified and debated among collectors, suggesting that extremely rare error coins from this era, if combined with exceptional condition and unique minting anomalies, could reach staggering valuations in private sales or auctions. Some online discussions even exaggerate figures into the millions, though serious numismatic experts caution that such numbers are not supported by documented auction records for the specific coin. But here is what is true. Extraordinary errors, when confirmed, authenticated, and graded at the highest levels, can command prices that shock even experienced collectors. Not because of hype, but because rarity in the coin world follows its own rules. A single verified mistake can outweigh millions of normal coins. And that is where the suspense deepens, because somewhere out there could be a 1977 Kennedy half dollar sitting in a drawer, a box, or a forgotten collection, waiting for someone to look closer. This is where attention to detail becomes everything. First, examine the date, 1977. Then check for that absence of a mint mark, which is normal for Philadelphia issues. But do not stop there. Rotate the coin under light. Look for doubling in the lettering. Focus on the fine edges of the design. Pay attention to Kennedy's hair detail, the lettering on the rim, and the sharpness of the strike. Because that small hesitation in your observation could be the difference between an ordinary coin and an extraordinary discovery. Now imagine this moment again. You are holding a coin that most people would spend without a second thought. But instead of spending it, you pause. You inspect it. You notice something unusual. Your heart starts to beat a little faster. You start wondering if this is real or just your imagination. And then you realize something powerful. Most valuable discoveries in history did not come from experts. They came from people who simply paid attention. But let's push this even further. What makes coins like this so fascinating is not just their potential value, but the mystery behind them. The idea that millions of coins were produced under strict government control, yet tiny imperfections still slipped through. Mistakes that were never meant to exist. Errors that were never meant to leave the mint. And yet they did. They entered circulation. They passed through hands. They traveled across decades. And they are still out there today, hiding in plain sight. That is the part most people never think about. Because while the world moves forward, coins do not disappear. They wait, quietly, patiently, for the right person to recognize them. And that brings us to the final truth. The 1977 no-mint mark Kennedy half-dollar may not be famous on its own. It may not be the rarest coin ever minted. But in the world of error collecting, even the smallest anomaly can create a ripple effect of value and desire. And the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is often just one detail that everyone else ignored. So here is the question you need to ask yourself right now. Because somewhere in your home, in your car, in a jar, or in an old collection, there could be a 1977 Kennedy half-dollar waiting for a second look. And if that coin carries the right error, the right condition, and the right story, it might not just be pocket change. A simple half-dollar from 1973. No mint mark. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screams value. But here is where everything changes. Because in the world of coin collecting, the most dangerous mistake is assuming that ordinary means worthless. Imagine holding a coin that passed through millions of hands, spent decades in circulation, and somehow survived every scrape, every machine, every moment of neglect. Now imagine being told that the exact coin in your hand could contain a hidden error so rare that collectors are willing to pay life-changing money just to own it. Some online reports and speculative listings even whisper numbers that sound impossible, reaching into the millions for extraordinary error examples in pristine condition. Whether every claim is verified or not, one truth remains undeniable. Rare errors in US half-dollars have changed ordinary people into overnight legends. And today we are going deep into one of the most misunderstood coins of all time. The 1973 no-mint mark Kennedy half-dollar. A coin that looks simple on the surface but hides secrets that most people will never recognize. Because that is exactly how it always starts. A coin no one pays attention to until it is too late. In 1973, the United States Mint produced Kennedy half-dollars in massive quantities. The Philadelphia Mint struck coins without a mint mark, while Denver and San Francisco produced their own marked versions. Most of these coins entered circulation without fanfare. They were used for everyday transactions, tossed into cash registers, and forgotten in change jars across America. But here is where the story takes a strange turn. Not every coin leaves the mint perfect. Some leave with mistakes so small they are invisible to the untrained eye. And those mistakes are exactly what collectors hunt for today. A missing detail here. A misaligned strike there. A subtle doubling in the lettering that only appears under magnification. These are not just flaws. In the coin world, they are possibilities. Possibilities that turn 10 cents into 10,000. Or more. And the 1973 no-mint mark half-dollar sits right at the center of this mystery. Because while most examples are common, a handful have been discovered with unusual characteristics that ignite bidding wars among collectors who understand what they are looking at. Now stay with this, because it gets more intense. One of the most talked about possibilities is the double die obverse. This happens when the coin is struck more than once in slightly misaligned positions, creating a ghosting effect in the text or design. On a Kennedy half-dollar, this can show up in the words Liberty or In God We Trust. At a glance, it looks normal. But under the right light, the letters seem to whisper two stories at once. Then there are strike errors. Coins that were struck off-center, leaving part of the design missing. Imagine a Kennedy half where the president's profile is pushed slightly out of frame, as if history itself was interrupted mid-strike. And it does not stop there. Some coins were struck on defective planchets, meaning the metal blank itself was flawed before it ever met the press. This can create uneven coloration, weak details, or unusual textures that make the coin stand out instantly to experienced eyes. But here is where most people make a critical mistake. They assume condition does not matter. In reality, condition is everything. A 1973 half-dollar with a dramatic mint error in average condition might be worth a modest premium. But the same coin in near-perfect condition, preserved in sharp detail with full luster, can multiply in value dramatically. That is where the world of high-grade numismatics becomes almost unreal. And this is where the suspense deepens even further. Because over the years, stories have circulated in collector circles about exceptional error coins tied to this era of Kennedy half-dollars. Some are documented, others are debated, and a few exist only as rumors passed from collector to collector, like hidden treasure maps with no confirmed location. There are even claims online of extraordinary auction results reaching into the extreme high-end for rare and visually stunning error specimens. While many of these figures are heavily disputed or lack verified auction records, they continue to fuel excitement in the collecting world. Why? Because history has already proven that the right error coin in the right condition can command astonishing prices when two determined collectors refuse to back down. So the question becomes this. The answer is awareness. Because most people will never notice the difference. They will see a coin and spend it without a second thought. But a trained eye sees something else entirely. A shifted strike that suggests mechanical failure at the mint. A faint doubling that reveals a moment of production instability. A surface texture that tells a story of a planchet that never should have been used. And suddenly, the coin is no longer just money. It becomes evidence. Evidence of imperfection in a system built for precision. Now here is the moment where everything starts to come together. If you have ever handled old $50, you need to pause and think about where they might be right now. Stored away, mixed into collections, sitting in jars forgotten for decades. Because the 1973 no-mint mark Kennedy $50 is not rare in general circulation. But rare versions of it absolutely are. And those are the ones that change lives. The ones that show clear minting anomalies. The ones that survive in unusually sharp condition. The ones that collectors chase because they represent something far bigger than face value. They represent discovery. And discovery always favors the curious. First, you look closely at the lettering. Not casually, but deliberately. Rotate the coin under a strong light and watch for shadows where there should be sharp edges. Doubling does not always scream at you. Sometimes it whispers. Next, examine the portrait of Kennedy himself. Look at the hairlines, the ear, and the edges of the jaw. Any irregularity, any softness in detail where sharpness should exist, can signal a striking issue. And finally, observe the overall surface. Does it look uniform? Or does something feel slightly unusual about the metal flow? Experienced collectors often describe it as a feeling before it becomes a fact. You cannot rely on one feature alone. It is the combination of traits that tells the real story. And that story can be far more valuable than anyone expects. Now imagine this for a moment. You are sitting at home. You open an old box. You find a handful of coins collected years ago. Among them, a 1973 Kennedy $50 with no mint mark. It looks ordinary, almost forgettable. But you remember what you just learned. You take a closer look. Your heart starts to race as small details begin to appear. Not obvious at first, but undeniable once seen. Suddenly, everything changes. Because now you are not just holding a coin. You are holding a possibility. And in the world of rare coin collecting, possibility is where fortunes are born. Some people will dismiss this as just pocket change. Others will spend years searching for the one coin that makes it all worth it. The difference between them is simple. Point one looks. The other ignores. And history always rewards the ones who look closer. So before you move on with your day, before you spend or overlook another coin, take a second look at anything from 1973. Especially the $50 without a mint mark. Because while most will be common, even ordinary coins can hide extraordinary secrets when you least expect it. And if you ever find one with a dramatic mint error or exceptional preservation, you may not just be holding a piece of American history. You might be holding a moment that could have been worth far more than anyone ever imagined. Because hidden inside ordinary pocket change, inside jars, drawers, old wallets, and forgotten collections across America, there may be a 1998 P. Kennedy $50 that most people have ignored for decades. A coin that some collectors whisper about. A coin surrounded by confusion, rumors, and shocking claims of life-changing value. And here is the question that should immediately grab your attention. What if one of the most overlooked modern $50 in circulation is hiding a rare mint? Error so dramatic that it could turn 50 cents into thousands of dollars? Or even more in the right condition? Now, before you dismiss this as just another coin story, stay with me, because what you are about to discover is exactly why experienced collectors never stop searching through their change. The 1998 P. Kennedy $50 was not supposed to be special. It was minted in Philadelphia, produced in massive numbers, and released into circulation as a standard issue coin. To most people, it is just another modern $50 with President Kennedy's profile on the front and the presidential seal on the back. But here is where things get interesting. Because within this seemingly ordinary coin series, there are rare anomalies. minting mistakes, striking errors, and subtle variations that most people would never notice, but collectors hunt for relentlessly. And in the world of coin collecting, it only takes one small mistake to transform something common into something extraordinary. Now imagine holding a coin that passed through countless hands unnoticed. A coin spent at a store without a second thought. A coin sitting in a dusty coin jar for 20 years. And then imagine discovering that it carries a mint error so rare that collectors would immediately recognize its importance. This is where the story of the 1998 P half dollar begins to take a darker, more intriguing turn. Because not all coins leave the mint perfectly. Some are struck off center, where the design appears shifted and incomplete. Some are struck twice, creating a ghost-like doubling effect on letters and features. Some are struck on the wrong planchet entirely, meaning the metal blank was never meant for that coin. And some suffer from subtle but valuable die cracks or missing details that only reveal themselves under magnification. And yes, these are the types of errors that can turn a simple 50-cent piece into something worth hundreds, sometimes even thousands of dollars depending on condition and rarity. But here is where curiosity turns into obsession. Because over the years, online discussions and collector forums have exploded with stories about extraordinary 1998 P. Kennedy half dollars. Some claims describe dramatic mint errors. Others exaggerate values into the millions. And while many of these viral claims are not supported by verified auction records, they continue to circulate because they ignite something powerful in every collector. Hope. The hope that the next coin they check might be the one. So let's slow this down and uncover what is actually real, what is exaggerated, and what you should truly be looking for if you ever come across a 1998 P. Kennedy half dollar. First, you need to understand what makes this coin even worth examining in the first place. The Kennedy half dollar series has always attracted attention because of its historical significance and silver era legacy. While by 1998 the coin was no longer made for general circulation use in large numbers, it was still produced for collectors and sets. That means fewer coins entered everyday circulation compared to earlier decades. And when supply is lower, even small errors become more desirable. Now here comes the first major pattern collectors look for. Mint striking errors. A 1998 P. Kennedy half dollar with a strong and obvious error can stand out immediately. For example, an off-center strike where part of the design is missing can catch attention instantly. The more dramatic the off-center appearance, the more desirable it becomes to error collectors. Then there is doubling. Not just any doubling, but true hub doubling where design elements like the word Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or the date appear slightly shifted or shadowed. Under magnification, this can create a striking visual effect that signals a valuable variety. And then there are planchet errors. Imagine a coin struck on a clipped planchet where a piece of the metal edge is missing, leaving a curved or straight cut. Or a coin struck on a thinner or thicker blank than normal. These variations are not just mistakes. To collectors, they are fingerprints of a malfunction inside the minting process. But here is the twist that most people do not realize. Most 1998 P half dollars are worth exactly face value 50 cents. No more. So why are people still talking about them like hidden treasures? Because every so often something unusual does surface. A certified mint error. A high-grade specimen. A dramatic strike anomaly. And when those coins enter auctions, they can sometimes bring surprising results depending on demand and condition. But let's address the biggest claim circulating online. You may have seen videos or posts suggesting that a 1998 P. Kennedy half dollar has sold for millions of dollars. Sometimes even figures like 2.6 million. Now here is the truth that serious collectors understand. There is no verified auction record supporting a 1998 P. Kennedy half dollar reaching anywhere near millions of dollars. Not even close. However, and this is important, the reason these claims spread so widely is because they mix real collector excitement with exaggerated storytelling. Rare coins can and do sell for high prices, but those extreme numbers are almost always tied to historic rarities, not modern half dollars from the late 1990s. Still, do not let that discourage you. Because while million-dollar claims are fiction, valuable errors are very real. Some certified Kennedy half-dollar errors have sold for hundreds, occasionally thousands, especially when they are visually dramatic and professionally graded in high mint state condition. And that is where your attention should be focused. Not myths of instant millions, but real indicators of collectible value. Now imagine this moment. You are sorting through loose change. You see a 1998 P. Kennedy half-dollar. It looks normal at first glance. But something feels slightly off. The strike looks uneven. The rim appears unusual. The lettering has a faint distortion. Most people would never think twice. But you are not most people anymore. You check closer, you tilt it under light, and suddenly you realize this coin might not be ordinary at all. This is the exact moment that has changed outcomes for collectors across the country. Because discovery in coin collecting does not always come from rare coins locked in vaults. Sometimes it comes from everyday circulation coins that everyone else overlooked. And here is where the suspense reaches its peak. What if the next coin you find is not just a minor error, but a dramatic mint mistake that was overlooked during production quality checks? What if it carries characteristics that place it in a niche collector category? What if, sitting in your hand right now, is a coin that deserves professional evaluation? Now let's bring this into reality. If you ever believe you have found something unusual on a 1998 P. Kennedy half-dollar, the first step is simple. Do not clean it. Do not alter it. Do not try to fix anything. Even the smallest cleaning attempt can destroy collector value instantly. Instead, compare it with known standard examples. Look at edge consistency. Check for doubling under magnification. Inspect the strike alignment. And most importantly, consider having it evaluated by a reputable coin grading service. Because in this world, condition and authentication are everything. A genuine mint error in high-grade condition will always attract more attention than a damaged or altered coin. And now we reach the final realization. The reason stories about coins like the 1998 P. Kennedy half-dollar spread so quickly is not because millions are being found every day. It is because the idea of hidden value is powerful. It makes people look closer. It makes people pay attention. And sometimes that attention leads to real discoveries. So as you go about your day, handling coins without a second thought, remember this. Every expert collector once started exactly where you are right now, looking at ordinary coins and wondering if something extraordinary was hiding in plain sight. And the truth is, while most coins will always remain common, the possibility of finding a genuine mint error is never zero. It only takes one moment. One coin. One discovery. And that is why you should never overlook the small details again. Because somewhere out there, in circulation right now, or sitting forgotten in a jar, a 1998 P. Kennedy half-dollar might be waiting to reveal something unexpected.